of low yields of the farmers, right? Even of the pest attack and disease may harm the biological process of the plant, and that may also be a cause of low yield, or maybe the crop value itself, right? So after all these things, so we know that from planting crops to marketing that product itself, farmers faces lot of risk involved. So these are the risks when farmers faces. Before we going to address the solution or to make policies to solve those problems, one need to understand it properly first, and also there is a need to acknowledge those problems, right? So acknowledgement is very important. So here what we can see that the present crisis in agriculture, which has the first official recognition of that crisis, has come from the National Commission on Farmers. Okay, all of you know that it was chaired by Professor M.S. Swaminathan, and that National Commission on Farmers, appointed by the Ministry of Agriculture and Government of India, was one of the earliest official recognition of the crisis what we could see in last couple of years. The commission was set the task of finding means of enhancing the welfare of the farmers itself, and the commission submitted some 6 reports in this regard. So the last report, which was submitted in October 2006 itself. So the commission has proposed several things. Actually, they have blueprinted all kind of how to mitigate all kind of risks which the farming community is facing, right? So one of the major recommendation is, of course, the support price. Okay, so based on the recommendation of the commission, there was a national policy for farmers which was envisaged in 2007 itself, and the recommendation says, and I would like to quote that there is a need to focus more on the economic well-being of the farmers rather than just on production. Socio-economic well-being must be a prime consideration of agricultural policy besides production and growth. I just want to give you a reminder that from the 1960s onwards, from Green Revolution onward, we have seen that the policies has mainly designed in such a way to increase the production itself. So there was very little effort to put and ensure the farmers' income. Okay, so over the period of time, farmers has contributed a lot for us. They have produced food grain from just triple and 5 times more than what it was during the independence. But on the same time, if we see the income increment, that is not so much of significant. So the committee has says that there is a conscious policy requirement to improve the farmers' income. All of you know that M.S. Swaminathan recommendation, which they have made precisely, but very little of that has been finally take a shape of the policy and etc. And this 10th anniversary of the submission, that means in 2016. So last report was 2006. 2016 was the 10th anniversary of that report. And Molla and Krishnan, they have written probably the most important recommendation of the NCF with regard to building confidence and providing incentive to farmers was its suggestion that farmers be ensured remunerative prices for crops. So what was that remunerative prices? Basically, M.S. Swaminathan committee, they were suggesting of a price which will be C2 plus 50% of that. We'll talk about that. What is that C2 cost means here. Such a policy, they think that such a policy would provide income security to farmers and some protection to them. Okay, so in this background, in this backdrop, what I'm going to do today is to consider these 2 sets of questions. So the first set of questions talks about, we investigate how government interventions in support prices and procurement and the physical location of agricultural productivity basically affected agricultural output prices. So that would be our first things to look into. And secondly, we'll examine the impact of the market price crash of a commercial crop on the profitability of small farmers. Okay, so here, as I have already mentioned, that the first set of question will be answered using the cost of cultivation survey provided by the Directorate of Economics and Statistics, Ministry of Agriculture. And second sort of question will be answered through the primary survey, which we have conducted 3 different period of time: 2005-6, 2010-11, and 2015-16. So some of those results I'm going to present today. As I have already said that some part of those discussion has already been published. So I will also tell you that publication so that you can go and read of all those things. So the first things which here require some kind of attention is that what is agricultural output policy here in India today. So the agricultural output policy in India basically says to ensure remunerative prices to growers for their produce. So what that has started long back in 1970-71, they have started a scheme called CCPC scheme. So cost of cultivation and production for principal crops. So that scheme, it was running from 1970-71. Basically, the Directorate of Economics and Statistics is the nodal agency to conduct that. But actually, the surveys was done by the state universities. So here in Karnataka, it's basically University of Agricultural Science. They have a department called Department for Cost of Cultivation Surveys, and they are the nodal agency to conduct the surveys. Now, the process and method they use, it's basically, we call it a cost carting method. So we have 2 different methods in agriculture to collect the information regarding input use and income of the farming. So one is, of course, the survey method, and another one is accounting method. So this survey basically talks about the accounting method, where they do visit the farmer household every day whenever they incur some input or cost, or when they dispose their product in the market, they do record them. So all the changes happening inside the farming household is recorded over the period of time. It's basically a kind of panel data for 3 consecutive years. So after 3 years, they change the number of, they change the farming household itself. Second thing to mention here is that basically when these agricultural universities, they collect those data, they submit it to the Ministry of Agriculture, and Ministry of Agriculture calculate or estimate the cost of cultivation. The same cost of cultivation they use for even gross national product calculation. So our national income calculation, the cost part comes from this survey itself. And this data also is used largely for the minimum support price. So how to fix the support price? This is the base for the government. So once the DES calculates or estimate the cost part, they then submit it to the Commission for Agricultural Cost and Prices. So as you know that it's again an agency of the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, where with the cost and other recommendations, suppose a state recommendation and etc., price parity of different crops and etc., based on all these things, they suggest the central government for the support price, and finally Government of India announced that support price. So in India, agricultural output price is largely depend on those support prices, how it has been announced, because that has a huge relationship with the market prices itself. Now, if we look at the very specific information of how they calculate agricultural cost in India, the official methodology so far, as I have already said, the data comes from CCPC scheme. They, for the time today itself, they calculate or collect almost 24 crops, the data on 24 crops from 19 major states. Okay, and actually these surveys are conducted by local universities, and later on it has been accumulated, and calculation and estimation was done in the DES. And finally, CSAP every year, seasonal wise, for the Kharif season, they publish one report for all the crops. For Rabi also, they also do separate reporting for sugarcane and copra separately. So these are the 4-5 reports every year they generate. So the source of this data is basically those reports, one. Second is they also, from 2010 onwards, they have also started uploading all those data in the DES website itself. So the DES website will be having the unit level data of that. So I have used some of that unit level data for this analysis. So from here, how many of you are aware of this scheme and data? Anyone of you? Okay. So here, first thing we need to understand, as all of you know, that recently we had a huge debate regarding our budget, where we are talking about doubling the farmers' incomes and what would be the support price for agricultural commodities. And it has been said in the parliament that it would be cost of cultivation plus 50% of that. And there was a huge amount of confusion created in that what is that cost of cultivation would be, and on top of 50% what we are talking about. So these are the basically the 3-tier system of cost of cultivation what the CCPC schemes generates. So the tier says that it has A, B, and C. So the basic funda here is that A1 is the basic cost which one farming household is of course going to having. Now this A1 cost, it's basically for the owner farm. So it doesn't include the tenant. As long as you are not including the rent paid for leased in land. So once you add the rent paid for leased in land with the A1, so basically A2 will be the basic cost for both owner cultivator and tenant cultivator. So let's start with that A2 cost itself. So A2 cost says that it's all actual expenses in cash and kind. So just quickly we should go through with all of the cost components. Normally they includes here in the cost A2. So it includes, it starts from the seeds. So it could be homegrown seed, it could be purchased seeds. So both. Then manure. So manure could be homegrown and purchased both. Chemical fertilizer, plant protection, irrigation cost, hired labor. Okay. Then animal labor. Animal, they also include the cost if the family is having the their own animal, and the cost of upkeeping those animals, and also hiring. Then they have the machine labor cost. So machine labor cost includes both hired machine and also the maintenance and fuel and etc. required for the own machine. Then they have interest on working capital. So as you know that in farming, it's basically 5 to 6 months of duration from the planting crop to the output itself. So they do invest in the beginning of the farming season, and then the returns comes at the end of the season. So there is some requirement of taking some interest of the amount of money they have invested there. So the general formula what they use is that they take the whole working capital and use it for the half of the cropping period itself. So suppose if it is 6 months, so a simple interest rate was calculated for 3 months, and it is 12% rate of interest, etc. Then they have the depreciation cost on machineries. Okay, so these are the major cost components which are there in the A2, and normally we call it paid out cost. Okay, so in A2 it doesn't include the family labor. So no imputation of the labor which family themselves provides. That is a separate cost. It's called A2 plus FL. Now, if we look at the conversation or debate which was going on in last couple of months, it basically talks about the C2 cost plus 50% of that. So in the C2 cost, basically it includes everything. Whatever cost, it's It's not only the paid out, but it's also imputed cost and 50% on top of that. So I think now it is much clear that what is the cost structure, what the scheme has. So it's very elaborated, huh? And I would really say that data is very one can segregate the components, each and every component to work with. So that is one of the advantage of this data has. Now, yeah, nice. Actually, I thought that let's not go into so details, but good that you have asked. So C2, as you know, that it includes all kind of cost. C2 star, it says that suppose say when you value the family labor, what price you will take, right? So what would be the wage for that family labor? So it says that higher wages, if the wage in the village is higher than the minimum wage rate, okay, so normally here in the C2 cost itself, it's based on the minimum wage rate. Okay, so whatever is the minimum wages for agriculture, that they impute for the family labor itself. But if the village existing wage rate is higher than the minimum wage rate, so that additional value need to be added here. Okay, so that gives you the C2 star. Okay, on the other hand, C3 says that C2 star plus 10% of C2 star, which is basically means 10% is for the managerial task. So suppose say if you may be the manager of that farm, suppose the head of the family member who just look after the farm, doesn't perform any manual work. So for that managerial input, nowhere we have considered that. So C2, yes. So it was on C2 cost. So here. Yes, yes, yes. So yeah, as I said, that it's a recommendation from the from a committee. So they thought that it's nowhere it says that they said that farmers should at least get C2 plus 50%. So if any government, any state government is ready to pay more than that, it's fine. There is no issue of, but they should at least get C2 plus 50%. But your concern is correct that in South India, agricultural wage rate is pretty high than the minimum wage rate itself. So C2 star would have been much relevant for that. Okay, but I'm just giving you the fact what it is right now. That could be a criticism of that itself. Now, from here, so the way I'm going to examine the government intervention on support price and procurement is that, first of all, I look into the shortfall in MSP in relation to the C2 plus 50%. So committee has already recommended that it should be C2 plus 50%, but we have some MSP recommendation, which is by central government. So we'll take the data from the cost of cultivation and compare it with the announced minimum support price, and we'll have a look of that what percentage of the cost was covered by the minimum support price itself. Okay, so that is one way to look into the product market differentiation and vulnerability exists in the market itself. The second would be the quantity of total produce procured by the government agencies, right? So all of you know that agriculture production and the marketing is so volatile in nature that if there is an increase in the production, there may be a glut in the market itself. So the price may fall. Okay, and when there is a fall in the production, so it's a demand-supply relationship, right? So when there is a supply glut, there may be high demand and there may be increase in the prices, but then consumer will be the sufferer. So in both the way, what state government and central government always try to intervene into to stabilize that prices. Right. So we'll also see that what is the procurement policies is playing role here. Right. Of course, the procurement talks about for the farmers' benefit. I'm not going to talk about or focus here of the consumer benefit itself. We are not going to talk about the consumer benefit itself. So here, basically, I have analyzed some 6-7 crops: rice, wheat, cotton, sugarcane, potato, jute, and arahar, right? But for this presentation, I'm going to show you only rice and wheat. Other data I have, if anyone is interested, I am ready to share that also. So what basically it shows that, so the first things which I have said, the two methods I will apply. So one is that percentage of that C2 plus 50%, which is covered by All India MSP, right? So here I should be truthful, and I should mention that of course it's the All India MSP which central government announces. Sometimes state government also gives some bonus on that, so which is not included here. Okay, and it's difficult to calculate also. So what I have done, that I have taken some 5 major rice producing states here, and then I have compared it with the cost C2 plus 50% with the MSP. So what we can see for the last 4 years, we have the data only till 2014-15 because this data takes time. So it's always 3 years lag period is there. Okay, so 3 years time period is required to process the data. So what it shows basically here, that West Bengal is one of the largest rice producing states in India, and we can see that almost in every years only 60% of that cost, C2 cost plus 50% is covered by MSP. Only 60% of that. On the other hand, some of the states like Punjab, where it is almost 85%. Okay, so we can see that eastern states like West Bengal and also some of the southeastern states, the amount of their cost plus 50% benefit was covered by MSP is around 60% of that. Okay, if we don't take the 50%, it's probably very equal to that C2 cost itself. So whatever MSP was announced, it's just about that C2 cost. So this is the first point to make here. Now, what it basically means is that Bengal, West Bengal, and UP, AP, and Tamil Nadu, these are the major rice producing states. Lot of their farmers are unable to get the returns which is expected from the cultivation itself. So the margin is very less. On the same side, these are the states where number of or proportion of small farmers is very high basically. So the major sufferers of this crops, basically cultivation, is the small farmers. Okay, whereas the northern states, Punjab, Haryana, and etc., they have more bargaining powers, which lend to the higher MSP and cost. But here, one thing also need to be mentioned, that as you know that as the scale or size increases, the cost also reduce, right? So basically the Punjab, they have their own machineries and etc., so which reduces their cost. On the other hand, in other states, it needs to be hired. So hiring cost itself is high. A little bit of productivity difference also makes because it's all per quintal. Okay, so productivity is also high in Punjab. So productivity also makes some difference of this. So this is the first point. Second point, we'll talk about rice and wheat both. So this is for the timing. This is rice. Second is the procurement of rice. So if you look at the procurement of rice, I have taken two indicator here. One is that marketed surplus ratio, and another is procurement. So what is marketed surplus ratio? Which is nothing but the amount of your production you disposed in the market, or you sell it. Okay, so what is the proportion of that disposed over the total production, right? So if we look that, so almost in every state it's more than 65%, right? So a substantial amount of the production, even though sometimes we don't recognize that the production of cereals and etc., it's mainly for the home consumption. But that is not, we can see that is not true. 60% of the production is for the market itself, more than 60% of the production. But when it comes to the procurement, we can again see the difference in different regions. In Bengal, it's only 10% of the total production, whereas in Punjab, it's almost 80% of the total production. Okay, so all of we know that if the government agencies are not there to procure the production, then it never goes on in favor of the farmers itself. So basically, the traders and middlemen, they play a huge role to influence the market. And I have not shown it here, but it's in one of my paper where I have argued that basically in all the states, the farm harvest price, what the farmers gets basically, it's always lower than the MSP. And it is basically and specifically true for eastern and southern states. North is slightly different, where you can see the government intervention and also the market price is higher than the procurement price. Okay, so it may go both the way around. That if you have a government intervention, sometimes it is also influencing the market price. On the other hand, the states where you have a very little procurement policies, where traders basically get benefited, basically the middleman gets benefited. But the story is not similar in case of wheat. Wheat tells us something little different stories here, where what we can see here that other than UP, most of the states, more than 80-85% of the cost of cost C2 plus 50% was covered by MSP, which is really good, not bad at all. Okay, so in case of wheat, it says that farmers are more beneficial, or they're getting more returns than the rice cultivation itself. This is first point. And second point is, of course, Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, these all are the northern states where they have more bargaining power over MSP than the south and eastern states. Of course, UP is not doing well. Only in one instance, Rajasthan in 2010-11, basically they have get little high MSP than the cost plus 50% of that year. But most of the cases, it's lower than the MSP announced. Okay, so of course we can argue that the argument which has come in the parliament itself in last few months, that the MSP which was announced by the central government, it covers the cost A2 plus 50%, which their data itself says it's not correct. Okay, largely it's not covering the cost C2 plus 50% criteria. Second thing is the procurement part. Now, if we keep apart UP, then Punjab, MP, Haryana, and Rajasthan is also not very good. But Haryana and Punjab, we can see that at least there is some kind of procurement policies active in those states. Almost 60-64% of the production was procured by the government agencies. On the other hand, in UP, Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, UP is very low. It's only 9%. So again, it comes that the same kind of argument comes in, that if there is no government agencies to procure the product, on the same time, market plays a huge role, where middlemen and the traders influence the price, and the major sufferers of those states are the small farmers, basically, because those are the small farmers dominated state itself. So from here, what we can conclude that, of course, even I have the analysis for cotton, sugarcane. Sugarcane, as you know, that in Mandya district in Karnataka, there is a huge protest of the farmers regarding sugarcane cultivation. So even no one is ready to purchase the sugarcane. They plowed the sugarcane land itself. In the northern part of Karnataka, every year there is a protest for tur dal or pigeon pea, right? So pigeon pea prices. So pigeon pea, again, it's a kind of dull for which they never gets the announced MSP itself, and it never covers the cost of cultivation. Where we have the shortage of pulses and dulls inside India, we do import pulses and dulls. So those pictures, cotton, sugarcane, then tur dal, arhar, etc., they also say the same story. Only exception, we could see little bit of wheat, which has little bit of advantage, and we can, so far you might have seen that whenever procurement, government price policy, etc., comes in, people say rice and wheat are the only crops which has certain amount of procurement and price policy effective. But I would say it's only wheat. Rice also doesn't come under that procurement policy itself. So first of all, that should we leave the agricultural output prices for the market to decide on? Yes, yes. Right now, as I said, that is, I'm only talking about a situation analysis. What situation exists. So we are not. I'm not focusing on the causes of that, but what you have said, it's one of the reasons that the present it is not the situation of 70s and 80s where public distribution system was very strong, but now it's in the process of dismantling that system. So without public. Yeah. Yeah. A PDF system. Yes. Yeah. No, see, again, we have in the procurement, in the PDF system itself, we have central pool and we have state pool both. Okay. So how much you procure through state pool, how much you procure through central pool? Because if you are procured, if your PDF system depends on the central pool itself, then you don't know from where you are procuring your crop. It may be, suppose say it's a big debate that Punjab, Haryana, etc., where lot of rice procurement happen, but they are not the consumer of large consumer of rice, right? So what happens, that comes to the central pool, okay, and then center distributes those things to the southern states and the states which are consumer of rice and rice products. Okay, so it's a good question. Of course, I will look into that. What is happening in Tamil Nadu? Tamil Nadu is, of course, one of the where we can see that PDF system is very active, where it's probably one per kg rice, 1 rupees per kg rice, right? But someone has to look into that if that rice is coming from the central pool or from the state pool. Okay, but right now the report and the data says it's only 14% of the total rice production which has been procured in Tamil Nadu also. Okay, but I don't have the exact answer what you have asked right now. So what we can see from here so far, that even though we have the policies from longer time, from 1970, 60s, 60s, 70s onwards, but it seems that in 2000 onwards, the policies of agricultural price policies or PDF system or procurement, all these things is in the mood of some dismantling of the system itself. But will it help the farmers, or will it create more problems for the farming community? That is what someone need to get into. Now from here, of course, there is always a debate that these are the cereal crops and etc. Now there is a huge move towards the commercial crops like sugarcane, crops like cotton, crops like potato, and etc. So to have a sufficient amount of income from farming, one always suggests to diversify their crops and move towards the commercial crops itself. But here I have taken a case of potato cultivation in Bengal, that these crops, their prices are very volatile. Okay, so if there is any crash in the market, what can it land to in the farmer's income itself? That is what my intention here. So here we have done a survey of 3 villages in West Bengal, basically in 3 consecutive periods. One is 2005, 2010, and 2015. And 2010 and 2015, we have seen that there was a crash on potato prices. And from there, I was trying to estimate that what effect it would have been having on the farmers. And they are all basically small farmers. So these are the villages. One is Panaha, Amarsingi, and Kalmandashguri. So first of all, Panahar is in Bankura district, Amarsingi, Malda, that is central Bengal, and Kalmandashguri in north Bengal, which is in Coach Bihar district. Now, these 3 villages again belongs to 3 different agroclimatic regions. As you know that Bengal has 6 different agroclimatic regions. So Kalmandashguri comes under Tista Tosha agroclimatic Tista region. Amarsingi comes under that alluvial region, old alluvial, and Panahar, new alluvial region. So this Panahar and Amarsingi, these 2 villages, they are very fertile land and etc. So you can see that three crops cultivation and all. So some of the basic characteristics of those villages, if we see that number of households in Panahar is almost 248, Amarsingi 128, 147. Total population also we can see. All these 3 villages are basically, these 2 villages are basically irrigated through canal, through tube well basically. Canals and ponds also substitute some of the irrigation. Kalmandashguri is a kind of dry village. Only 35% of the irrigation comes from tube well. In Panahar, basically, when we are talking about potato, it makes sense for Panahar and Kalmandashguri. The cultivation of potato is very little in Amarsingi. Almost all these villages, there is around cropping intensity is around something 200%. So you can see the double cropping is very prominent. Even though some field you can also see 3 crops. One of the common feature all of these villages has that the lands are very tiny and small. Most of the cases it's less than 1 hectare. Second is, of course, all of those villages, rice plays a very dominant role. So rice cultivating village. So these are the commonality between those. Now, what I have tried here is that as we know that there is a crash in potato prices. So what I did is first I calculated the income from cultivation per household for all these 3 villages. And here we can see that Panahar had some advantages in terms of irrigation, in terms of cropping intensity, in terms of yield also. Yield is higher in Panahar. Then we have tried to see that how price crash has affected all these 3 villages. Next is that if we recalculate the potato price, if we take the last 3-year average price of potato, what it is going to affect on the income itself. So that is second. The third one, I have also tried to calculate that what would be the cumulative impact of total returns from cultivation for those villages, and what are the reasons that potato price crash in those particular areas. So these are the things I'm going to look here. So the first of all, you can see that, of course, in all these villages, I have taken you can see the number of households differs, right? So I have taken only those households who have some land. Okay, so otherwise those who not part of the cultivation, they have been removed from this analysis. So here we can see that the median income from all these mean income for all these three villages is almost same. There is no significant difference of mean average income for all those villages. Now it's even though it's not price adjusted, it's 2010 prices, but still you can see that it's only 11,000 rupees per year from agriculture. Okay, I'll show you that what they of course have some support from the non-agriculture and animal husbandry also, but it itself says that 11,000 is very tiny, right? Income from farming, and at least one or two members of their households involved in the farming itself. So this is the situation. Now, if we recalculate, when we have recalculated the whole thing using the last 3-year price average, what would have been the situation? It shows that the mean income has increased to 35,000 now for Panahar. So 11 to 35,000. So almost almost 3 times higher than that. And also it shows the pattern that Panahar is one of the village where the productivity is higher, more irrigation and etc. In terms of return is also they are doing well. But if there is any, when there was a price crash, basically they are the sufferers. So the advanced village was the most sufferer for any kind of price crash. These are the maximum and minimum few households it talks about. Now, the second thing is that, as I was talking about, that income from farming is not all. You can see that there is a support from income from animal husbandry and income from other sources also. So other sources, of course, include the non-agricultural, non-farm sources, and also from salary and etc. But together itself, it's not very great, right? It's something 50,000-60,000 per household itself, which itself is not sufficient for their to maintain their livelihoods and all. Now, from here, what we have tried to look into that so far whatever we were talking about, it's based on A2 cost. Okay, A2 is the basic, right? So if you take the C2 cost, which includes all kinds of cost imputation, then we will say that for Panahar and Kalmandaju, it's basically negative. So there is no return from farming for that particular year in 2010, right? Similar kind of situation we have seen in 2015 also, right? So of course, I'm not saying that every year is same for the farmers, right? But it's again depends on the frequency of that bad years, right? And here the bad year is not because of the production or because of the environmental and weather constraints. It's because of the market prices and for a particular crop itself, only for one crop, potato. Others crops were doing pretty well. Now here, if we calculate the losses incurred by farmers based on cost A2 and cost C2, we can see that almost 28% in Panahar, 50% in the Kalmandajguri. If we calculate based on cost C2, they're incurring losses. So it's not that the losses are homogeneously spreaded and etc. inside the village. Some still in that bad situation. Few of the households are doing well. They may not be very significant in number, but still they have got some kind of returns from that. But we can see that majority of them have made losses from the farming itself. In cumulative terms, this is nothing but a Lorentz curve. So if we add the income of the farm households, it says that here is almost 80%. If we add the 80% of all the households' income, it's negative basically. So here it's zero. From here, they starts making some, in terms of total village earnings, they start making some positive returns. So in Panahar, it's 80. In Kalmandajguri, it's almost 40%. So we can see the severity, the kind of effect of price crash it had on the farming returns itself. Next is, of course, we have already said that it's because of the potato price crash. So here we can see that in Panahar, basically they had three different kinds of potato cultivation. One is Jyoti and Pokhraj. These two varieties are basically for the market, and another one is Atlantic. So it's a PepsiCo production. So it's a contract farming. Even though the number is very small, only five households. Okay, so for them, this Atlantic production, basically they have got something 490 rupees per quintal price, and they could manage the returns. But for the Jyoti and Pokhraj, which is basically for the market, they made a huge loss, and we can say this loss here itself. So you have cost A2 and C2 here. So if we look at the column here, mean, okay, 286 rupees is the cost, paid out cost, and 376 is the cost C2, whereas the market average price was only 181 rupees. Okay, so almost double per quintal they have made losses. Now here, even though in my paper I have tried to find out what could be the reasons for all these things. One is of course the lack of storage facilities. Okay. Second is the kind of export policies the state government having. Okay. On the other hand, dependency of potato or exporting the potato to other states over the period of time in Bengal has started reducing. So Bengal is the exporter of potato in Orissa, Assam, Sikkim, some southern states also. But because there is a huge fluctuation of the production process itself, so for other state also they have started cultivating their own potato to reduce the risk of importing from other states. That has also over the period of time has reduced the demand for Bengal potato. But on the same time, the potato cultivators, because it's a high income crops, high value crops, the area under potato over the period of time has increased. There was no decrease in the area under that, but we could not open up the new avenue for that. And this is the reason where why small farmers is making huge amount of losses from potato cultivation. I have tried once to cross check with that. Of course, the storage is one reason, but what is the price if they could have if they would have stored it for the timing, say for 4, 5, 6 months and marketed it. So here we can see the results. So this is the market rate of potato from February to December for full year almost. And this blue line says the market price. Okay, market price of potato nearest regulated market. On the other hand, this red line talks about the farm harvest price. So we can see here that basically farmers are selling their potatoes from February to May itself. So first 4 months, beginning of those 4 months where they may not need to store it in the cold storage, they can keep it at home itself. So beginning of in these 3-4 months, they are disposing most of their potatoes. When price started peaking from here, June to December, basically the traders plays the roles here. So nothing comes from the farmers side. So again, this could be a solution for if we could have give more storage place for the farmers to store their potatoes, so they could have gained more and the situation where the price crash happens. So from here, what we can conclude that of course from the second part, that a substantial proportion of farmers, we could see that they are making losses, and this loss is because of the lack of or imperfect market and lack of institutional support, absence of institutional supports. And this volatility of prices in commercial crops, or basically high value crops, is making them financially ruined in the absence of procurement and etc. And of course, in potato, there is no procurement exist. So here I will stop. If you have any queries and question, I can address. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think again the political economy comes in here. What I can say about, because I have tried to study the market chain. I don't know if we have that graph here. I don't have the graph here right now. But I have tried to study the market chain of potato in those areas. And what I have found that it may be sometimes from the farm to the market, it may be more than 10 hands. So you can understand the kind of things is happening, and a huge nexus between the traders, local traders, village traders, and the mandi traders. So basically, in the regulated market, the traders have their own agents who bid the crop prices inside the village. Even if you think that you will not sell the product to that particular trader, you will go to the regulated market. But finally, when you go to the regulated market trader will quote the less what you have been quoted there in the village itself. Okay, so then what happens that you have you are farmers in uncertainty, because in addition they will add to the cost of transporting into that, but finally ending up with the lesser prices. Now what happens that in Bengal, basically it's almost 40% of the population, I can say, involved in petty trading, right? And they plays a huge role in the politics of the state itself, right? So if you, it's of course we have the theories, we have suggestions from the economist and etc. how to work with this market chain, how to remove them, how to bring the farmers in direct contact with the consumers itself, so that both consumers and farmers will be benefited. But what will happen with this 40% population? Do you have any alternative for them, alternative job opportunities and etc.? If you wipe them out from the system itself, where will they find their job, right? So there will be an immediate crisis, political crisis inside the state itself. So this could be one of the reasons that why even the suggestion exists, but implementing those suggestions is not so easy. Yeah. 490 rupees per quintal, yeah. 490 rupees per that year, yeah. Oh. Yes, I have done it separately for both. Basically, for excluding those 5 households and including them also. Here, I have one table where you can see that. See, this is basically the median. The village has 7 median farmers who has land more than 2 hectares. Okay, and they have their machineries and etc. They are basically not typical farming community. They also have their own trading business and etc. Now you can say they are the capitalist landlord kind of system inside inside West Bengal itself, where the farming itself is very tiny in nature. So they're not very big in size, maybe uh, just about 4 hectares or so. But they have others support, which makes their scale larger. And you can see that out of this 7 cultivated potato, they are the one who cultivated Atlantic, right? And only one made losses on potato cultivation. Rest returns is high. On the other hand, out of 93 small farmers, 76 were in loss. Okay, so 80%, more than 80% made losses. Now the question is, of course, I have also tried to address even the paper which I have published and talks about that. Reviewer also asked me the same question, that why the rest of the small farmers are not going for that kind of arrangement. So as I said, it's a PepsiCo company. So they have their agents to work with the farmers. Now, one reason maybe the others are very tiny in size. Okay, so bringing them together and convincing them for the contract farming and etc. may be difficult for the small farmers. They might have found it difficult. On the other hand, these medium farmers, they are slightly bigger in size, educated family, have some sort of other trading business, well connected with the urban parts and etc. So agents found them more accessibility was much more higher. That could be one of the reasons. Second reason, what I have also seen in normal year, this is of course a bad year when price crash happened. In a normal year, the income from potato for the marketed potato itself, Jyoti and Pokhraj, is not bad actually. In normal year, they could earn more than what they are getting from the contract farming itself. But as you said, that if it happens very often, so we have seen in 2010, again it has happened 2015. If it happens very often, so there may also be a push from small farming community to have some kind of contract structure. But one also need to understand that what kind of bargaining power the farmers will be having, what kind of structure need to be there to ensure their returns and etc. Right? So if all these things work out well, then contract farming could be one of the option for to avoid this kind of risk. No, see, okay. So when one is calculating the cost for irrigation, it has two parts. One is if you are buying water from say from state government sources or from any private tubes and etc. There it's pretty straightforward. You just take the amount of money you have spent for that. But if you have your own resources, own tubal, then it's basically it takes the if it is run by electricity, then electricity charge. If it is run by diesel and etc., kerosene is also used for pumping water in Bengal. So diesel, kerosene charges. Then the investment you have made, capital investment you have made, depreciation on that also. So digging the tubel and maintenance of tubel also. So maintenance of tubel will come directly to the as a cost. Diesel, kerosene, electricity, the direct cost, and then the capital investment, the interest part will come to that depreciation part. So whatever capital investment you have made, they calculate the depreciation on that. So they have a clear chart of that for each 5 horsepower, what would be the life period and what would be the depreciation rate for that. Okay, so based on that, they calculates the depreciation for every year. Okay, so those all of the things will be counted, and of course, if there is any hired labor, all labor involved into that. So if you are hiring any labor for irrigation, that cost will also come. Shall we end up? Yeah. I'll just mention that actually all these things has been discussed in recently Madhura Saminathan and Sandipan Bakshi. They have edited a book called How Do Small Farmers Fare? How do small farmers fare? Okay, so in that book, I also have 2 chapters. So where all these things have been discussed in details, even though authors also made a very concrete attempt to understand and analyze the small farming problems. So that is the one. Even a review of agrarian studies. It's a journal by Foundation for Agrarian Studies. The data which I have used here, the village survey data I have used here. So there also they deal with, and in the last issue I have published 2 papers into that. Even though in my abstract I have talked about NSSO situation assessment survey data, but that work is not yet completed, so I could not present it here. Sometimes I will do that. So these are the things or resources which can look into to understand the small farming problem in more concrete way.
So I was just wondering if there is a caste aspect to this, like
there is a
caste aspect to this.
Okay.
Like people, the higher caste are like have better access to information, or like have good networks with the traders, so that they can make better decisions. So I was wondering if that is the case, or like.